This video was made possible by the support of our amazing patrons. We can't thank you enough for your generosity, which helps to keep the channel going. Hello everyone and welcome to another EDH gameplay video brought to you by Affinity for Commander. My name's Martin.
And my name is Alex.
This week we have a short but sweet game which was just too funny not to share with you all. I promise that I'll make it up to you with a longer than usual one in the near future, but for now please enjoy this crazy game. Also, if anyone is attending GP Liverpool this weekend, we'd love to say hi. We'll be there over the weekend and we'll be wearing our Affinity for Commander t-shirts, so should be easy to spot. With that out of the way, let's take a look at those opening hands.
My commander is Animar, Soul of Elements. I keep an opening hand of Abzan Beastmaster, Solemn Simulacrum, Search for Tomorrow, Sulphur Falls, Botanical Sanctum, Rootbound Crag, and a Forest.
My commander is Sidisi, Brood Tyrants. My opening hand consists of Muldrifter, Whip of Erebos, Opal Palace, Temple of Malady, Dimir Guildgate, and 2 islands.
Chris's commander is Xantcha, Sleeper Agent. His opening hand contains Zozu the Punisher, Twilight Prophet, Citadel of Pain, Bloodstained Mire, Wooded Foothills, and 2 swamps.
And finally, Phil's commander is Karrthus, Tyrant of Jund. He keeps an opening hand of Eternal Witness, Moonveil Dragon, Farseek, Nature's Law, Command's Tower, Verdant Catacombs, and a Forest.
Chris wins the die roll and decides to go first. He plays a swamp and casts Blood Chief Ascension. He then passes the turn.
Alex plays Botanical Sanctum and then suspends Search for Tomorrow with 2 time counters on it. He then ends his turn.
In his turn, Phil plays Command Tower. He then passes to Martin.
I play Temple of Malady, scrying the top card of my library to the bottom. I then end my turn.
In his turn, Chris plays Wooded Foothills. He then pays 1 life and sacrifices it to put Blood Crypt into play tapped, and passes to me.
In his upkeep, Alex removes a time counter from Search for Tomorrow and then plays Sulphur Falls tapped. He then passes the turn.
Phil plays a Forest and then casts Farseek. He puts Canyon Slough into play and ends his turn.
I play Dimir Guildgate and then pass to Chris.
Chris plays Bloodstained Mire, pays 1 life and immediately sacrifices it to put a mountain into play. Next, he casts Zozu the Punisher. We told you this was going to be a short game. Chris then ends his turn.
In his upkeep, Alex removes the final time counter from Search for Tomorrow and puts an island into play. Zozu deals him 2 damage and Alex casts his commander, Animar, Soul of Elements. He then plays a Forest, takes 2 more damage and passes the turn. Chris puts a quest counter on Blood Chief Ascension and Phil moves to his turn.
Phil plays Verdant Catacombs, taking 2 damage from Zozu. He then pays a life, sacrifices the fetch land and puts a swamp into play, taking 2 more damage, and then casts Nature's Law, putting Cinderglade onto the battlefield. He takes another 2 damage from Zozu and then casts Eternal Witness, returning Verdant Catacombs to his hand. Finally finished hurting himself, Phil passes to Martin, and Chris puts another quest counter on his Ascension.
In my turn I play an island, taking 2 damage. Next I cast Perpetual Timepiece and end my turn. Chris puts a 3rd quest counter on his Ascension and then moves to his turn.
Chris plays a swamp, and then casts Citadel of Pain. He taps his remaining land to avoid taking a damage, and passes to me.
Alex plays Rootbound Crag, taking 2 damage from Zozu. He then casts Abzan Beastmaster and puts a +1/+1 counter on Animar. Next, Alex casts a Morph card, which enters as a 2/2 creature. He puts another +1/+1 counter on his commander and then taps all of his lands before passing to Phil.
For his turn, Phil goes straight to combat. He attacks Chris with his Eternal Witness, and Chris blocks with Zozu. Blood Chief Ascension triggers, Phil loses 2 life, and Chris gains 2 life. In his second main phase, Phil plays Verdant Catacombs once more, pays 1 life, and sacrifices it to put a Forest onto the battlefield. He then casts Savage Ventmaw, and ends his turn.
I begin my turn by playing an island, and then cast Whip of Erebos. I then pass to Chris.
Chris starts his turn by playing a swamp, and then casts Torment of Hailfire, where X is 3. We realise that discarding cards still results in us losing life and allows Chris to gain life thanks to his Ascension, so all decide to take 9 damage. He then passes the turn.
Alex plays an island and then casts Solemn Simulacrum. He puts a +1/+1 counter on Animar and then puts a forest into play tapped. Moving to combat, Alex attacks Chris with Animar, his Beastmaster and his Morph. Chris takes 8 damage and Alex moves to his end step. He leaves 4 mana untapped, taking 4 damage from Citadel of Pain and passes to Phil.
In his turn, Phil goes straight to combat. He attacks Chris with his Ventmaw, dealing him 4 damage, and adds 6 mana to his mana pool. In his second main phase, Phil casts Maelstrom Pulse, destroying Chris's Bloodchief Ascension. He then uses his 6 floating mana to cast See the Unwritten, to which I respond by unmorphing Void Mage Apprentice, countering it. Phil then casts Dragonlord's Servant, taps his open mana, and ends his turn.
I start my turn by casting my commander, Sidisi Brood Tyrant. I mill 3 cards, fail to mill a creature, and then use my timepiece to mill another 2. This time I mill a creature and make a 2/2 zombie thanks to Sidisi. Next I play Temple of Mystery, scrying the top card of my library to the bottom, and then pass the turn to Chris.
Chris plays a mountain and then casts Twilight Prophet. He then casts Mind Crank, making Martin a very happy bunny. With nothing more to do, Chris ends his turn.
Alex draws a card in his upkeep as a result of his Beastmaster, and then plays Rogue's Passage. Next he casts Jin-Gitaxias Core Augur and puts a +1/+1 counter on his commander. Moving to combat, Alex once again attacks Chris with Animar, dealing him 5 damage. He then taps his final untapped land, moves to his end step and draws 7 cards. Alex then discards down to 7 and passes the turn.
Phil begins his turn by casting Sarkhan Vol, and uses his -2 ability to borrow Jin-Gitaxias for the turn. He then makes a deal with Martin, agreeing to attack him with the Praetor to kill it before it can return to my control. Phil also attacks me with his Ventmaw, and Martin blocks Jin-Gitaxias with both of his creatures. The Praetor, Sidisi and Zombie are destroyed. Martin gains 5 life from his Whip's lifelink, I take 4 damage and mill 4 cards thanks to Mind Crank. Phil adds 6 mana to his mana pool thanks to his dragon, and then casts Explosive Vegetation in his second main phase. He puts a mountain into play, plays a mountain, and taps all of his lands before passing to Martin.
In my turn I play Opal Palace and recast Sidisi. I mill 3 cards, one of which is Wonder, making a 2/2 zombie as a result of Sidisi's ability. I control an island, so all of my creatures gain flying from Wonder, and I end my turn.
Chris plays Polluted Delta, gaining him the city's blessing. He then casts his commander, Xantcha Sleeper Agent, and has her enter under my control. Chris then activates Xantcha's ability, drawing a card and making me lose 2 life. I mill 2 as a result of Mind Crank, and Chris pays a life to sacrifice his fetch land, putting Smouldering Marsh into play. He then taps the marsh and passes the turn.
In his upkeep, Alex draws a card thanks to Abzan Beastmaster. He then plays a forest and casts a Morph. He puts a +1/+1 counter on Animar and then casts Deshana, Voice of Thunder. He puts another +1/+1 counter on his commander and then draws 7 cards. Not yet finished, Alex casts Genesis Hydra where X is 6. He puts 6 +1/+1 counters on the Hydra, a +1/+1 counter on Animar, and reveals the top 6 cards of his library. Alex puts Tireless Tracker into play this way, casts another Morph, and puts another +1/+1 counter on Animar. Still not done, Alex casts Desolation Twin, putting another +1/+1 counter on Animar and making a 10/10 Eldrazi. He then casts Beast Whisperer, putting another +1/+1 counter on Animar, and casts Ulamog, the Infinite Gaia. He puts yet another +1/+1 counter on his commander and destroys Savage Ventmaw with Ulamog's cast trigger. Moving to combat, Alex attacks Chris with Animar and Sarkhan with Xantcha, Abzan Beastmaster, and Solemn Simulacrum. Phil blocks the Beastmaster with his servant, destroying it. Chris takes lethal commander damage, and Sarkhan's loyalty is reduced to 0. Alex then loses control of Xantcha as her owner has left the game, discards down to 7, and ends his turn.
In his turn, Phil and Martin calculate how much damage they can deal to me, and realise they are 1 short of killing me. Martin uses Temporal Timepiece in Phil's draw step to mill 2 cards, milling a creature and making a 2/2 zombie. Unfortunately for him, Martin also mills Gaia's Blessing, forcing him to shuffle his graveyard into his library. This means that Wonder is no longer in his graveyard, so his creatures lose flying, completely messing up his plan to kill me. Not to be deterred, Phil casts his commander, Karrthus, Tyrant of Jund. He moves to combat, attacking me for 7, and then passes the turn.
In my upkeep, I mill 2 cards from Perpetual Timepiece, milling a creature and creating a 2/2 zombie. I then cast Altar of Dementia and use Whip of Erebos to reanimate the Vulturous zombie that I just milled with my timepiece. Next I sacrifice my 3 zombie tokens to my altar in order to mill Phil for 6 and put 6 +1/+1 counters on my Vulturous zombie. Moving to combat, I attack Alex with my plant zombie and Phil with Sidisi. Sidisi's ability triggers, I mill 3 cards and make another 2/2 zombie. Alex takes 9 damage, knocking him out of the game, Phil takes 3 and I gain 12. In my post-combat main phase, I sacrifice Vulturous zombie to my altar, milling myself for 9. I mill a creature, make yet another zombie and pass to Phil.
Phil starts his turn by casting Tempt with Discovery, which Martin is not tempted by at all and immediately refuses. He puts Temple of the False God into play, and then casts Moonveil Dragon before moving to combat. Phil attacks Martin with both of his creatures, using Moonveil Dragon's ability to give them both +1/+0. Unable to block, Martin takes 14 damage. Phil then ends his turn.
I play Simic Guildgate and then use my timepiece to mill 2. I fail to mill a creature and calculate that Phil can't kill me with commander damage next turn unless he draws an untapped red mana producer. I decide to reanimate Genesis with my whip and then move to combat. I attack Phil with everything, milling 3 cards with Sidisi. I mill a creature and make a zombie, and Phil blocks an attacking zombie with Dragonlord's Servants. Phil takes 9 damage, I gain 11 life, and I move to my second main phase. I sacrifice Genesis to Altar of Dementia, milling a creature and making another zombie. Hoping that Phil doesn't draw a mountain, I pass the turn.
Phil draws for his turn, and plays Stomping Ground. He loses 2 life to have it into the battlefield untapped and moves to combat. Phil activates Moonveil Dragon's ability 6 times, giving his creatures +6/+0, and attacks Martin with both of his dragons, dealing him lethal commander damage and ending the game.
Well, that's it for another episode. We hope that you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like this video if you want to see more content like it, and leave us a comment down below. Also, feel free to follow us on Twitter @4commander and check out our Patreon page, links in the description. We'll see you next time.